It's 7 o'clock on the dot. So let's go ahead and get started. First item on the agenda are the proposed tax rates. I sent you guys a memo that was in your meeting packet, and then there was some additional information that was sent out to you all. So as you know, the PVA did their 4-year assessment on all of our properties. So the real property subject to rate increased pretty significantly. It increased 28% over the prior year for the personal or the real property, and then the tangible assessment increased 61%. So once Sherry did the numbers to calculate compensating rate and comp plus 1, 2, 3, 4, it was a significant, substantial decrease. Any of those were a substantial decrease in the rates of both real and personal. So I know we had discussed a little bit, maybe offline, about the potential of looking at some of the other taxes that we apply to our residents and business owners within the city. And one that I have always wanted to try and either reduce or eliminate was the franchise fee. So that's the 3% tax on all of your Duke and Owen bills, your gas and electric. So that's every single month. Every one of the individuals that are within our city that are paying those bills, they're seeing that. And as you know, everything is going up in price. So if we can figure out some way to reduce as much as possible the burden on our citizens, I'm a strong advocate for that. So the idea, and again, this is an idea, a recommendation, and it's up for discussion tonight, was to take a 29% reduction in the real estate, the real property tax rate. So our current rate is 0.301, and let's see here. The recommended real property tax rate is 0.270. So technically that's comp plus 11, but it is still a 29% reduction in the tax rate. Then for tangible tax, our current rate is 0.296, and my recommended rate was 0.213. which is a 61% decrease in the tax rate. Also comp plus 11. My reasoning behind this is our utility franchise fee brings in $804,000 of revenues, and that's as the actuals for 2022, and that's the proposed, when in the budget, the anticipated revenues for 24 are 804. If we took the rates that I've recommended, it would increase our revenues by approximately $544,916 from what we put in the budget for real property and tangible property. So if we were to either completely eliminate the franchise fee, we would see a reduction in overall revenues of approximately $200,000. Or you reduce it by half, or whatever options you have. But there are options here. Either way, the goal is to reduce the tax burden as much as we possibly can on the individuals that we are serving. So, what questions do you have? Ms. Kyle?
I believe that you had in that report also that if we did the recommended, that we were still going to get more coming in than what was actually budgeted for
Yeah.
revenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, about $544,916.
So then we wouldn't really be seeing any reduction in our revenues. So I'm thinking, let's give the people a break. God knows they need it.
Well, we would see, like, if we did the total recommended idea of eliminating the franchise fee of 3%, that 3% is, the budgeted revenues are $804,000. Okay? So the increase that the property tax and the tangible tax would bring in would not make up the full amount, and I understand that.
Okay.
So I truly believe our payroll taxes will make up the difference, and there's not going to be an issue. But, Ms. Reckers?
So this is two entirely different conversations. One is the franchise fee, and one is the by statute requirement to discuss the real and tangible taxes. I appreciate the dialogue, but we really need to treat these as two separate things. So we've got the proposed tax revenues, and we've got the comp plus 1, 2, 3, 4, and 11. It jumps to 11. So this is really what we're required to speak about. This is what we're required to decide on. If we were to talk about this franchise fee removal reduction, it's $807,000 for this year, anticipated. But this is in perpetuity. This is forever. So we would lose that revenue forever from our budget. So if again, this is two different discussions that we are meddling into one, and it truly needs to be two different conversations.
It's a tax plan, though. It's understanding it holistically and all the different revenues that come in.
I hear you, but one is required and one is would be nice to have, right? One dialogue is required to be had today.
Sure.
The other is a nice to have, and they're in the same memo. So it's just my opinion that they should be separated out. But on this topic, there's a reason why, our representatives in Frankfurt didn't just rip the Band-Aid off and say, we're going to eliminate the state income tax in one fell swoop, right? They're doing a wind-down approach because they have to account for variable change and other factors that impact our Commonwealth. If we were to, I love, like I said in the email that I sent you guys, I love on paper the elimination of a tax. It sounds fantastic, but this would be arguably forever. So if we were to pursue this, I would want to personally see it wound down so that we could see the impact, that would look like year over year, and do appropriate projections. We can sit here all day and say we rely on occupational, but we could have something impact that. And I know I've been saying that for years now, that we could have a situation where we lose large employers and we can't rely on occupational. What we can and have historically relied on is this consistent franchise fee, just like every other large city in the Commonwealth has a franchise fee. Almost every. Fact check me on that. But again, this is something we should be having separate discussions about and not meddling them together.
Man, I couldn't disagree with you more, but it's okay. I just don't think you can talk about one and not the other, because it's all the revenues. And if you're looking at a huge reduction in the property tax rate and the tangible tax rate, and you don't pay attention to all the other revenue options, the revenue streams that we have, and the taxations that we charge to our citizens, I don't think you're doing it justice. So with all respect, I really do disagree, and that's okay. So, anybody else want to talk? Ms. Nicely?
I just have something real quick. If we remove the franchise fee, it doesn't necessarily mean forever, like we're removing it possibly now, but 3 years down the road or something, we can revisit it. I just wanted to clarify because I heard we were removing it forever, and it could be brought back into play if we needed the extra income for the city, right? Okay.
It's an allowable tax for cities to charge. The state gives us so many different ways that we can tax the citizens, and that is just one of the streams of revenue that we can opt into.
I do want to remind everybody that our current franchise agreement that we renewed a year or two ago?
February 2020.
Yeah, runs through 2031. Now, I don't believe that Duke or Owen would care if we went to them to renegotiate the franchise agreement to reduce what was paid, but I will say that any time we have negotiated any changes or anything to the franchise agreement, it takes months and months and months, and so I don't think that's a quick switch, right? I just want everyone to know that. Like, this isn't something we can, a meeting in 2 weeks, say we're going to reduce it from 3 to 2.5% or whatever. We have an agreement in place for 10 years. The purpose of those franchise agreements is for utilities to have rights to our right-of-way. The state allows us to charge them. They then pass that on to their customers. And I just heard tonight, for the first time, that there may be some issues with even our abilities to reduce. I need to do a little bit more digging into that. I'm not aware of anything that would require us to have a fee, because I know there have been cities that have not had a fee, because I have represented cities while we have added a franchise and a franchise fee. But I just, again, I'm not trying to complicate matters or get into the objective of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I just want to remind everyone that right now we have 10-year agreements, and any changes to those agreements would require agreement by Duke and Owen. Why they would care if we reduce the fee we're charging them, I wouldn't think they would, but that would be a part of the process, and that might, and again, in dealing with Duke and Owen, that might be a 6-month process, even if we started it today, to reduce that. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 months. We don't have control over that. So that's all I have on that matter.
So Jack, so we take this away, does that guarantee they take it away from the citizens?
No. I mean, arguably no, because at this point, it's a fee we're charging them. I don't know what the Public Service Commission, I don't know what the Public Service Commission would say about that. I just brutally don't know. I'm going to sit here and say I've never been a part of a city that's reduced that fee once it's been imposed. I don't know if they have obligations or not. I mean, that's something I think we'd want to look into. And I think that would be a part of our negotiation with them on an amended franchise agreement would be, hey, if we reduce this fee from 3 to 2 or 3 to 1 or stage it over the next 8 years, are you going to pass that savings on to the customers? I think we'd want that in writing that they were going to make a part of that new amended franchise agreement.
Okay.
But I think it's an excellent question.
Yeah, but they could also adjust up their fee for something else. Yeah.
Again,
As they've done.
I understand it's a transient fee that moves to the customers, but the document says we're imposing this fee on Owen and Duke. I mean, and we're charging Owen and Duke this fee for the use of our right-of-ways. Now, again, they pass that on to their customers. We all know that.
It's on our,
Right.
it's on our bill as city fee. Anybody else? Mr. Hermes?
Yeah, I mean, I think assuming that Duke and Owen would say that they would take that off directly off of the customers. I like eliminating that tax a lot because it impacts everyone in the city. The property tax decrease doesn't affect apartment dwellers, or, maybe if somebody's leasing a space, potentially does not impact them. When we lower those rates, it helps the landowner. Tangible tax rate decrease helps people that have a lot, or businesses that have a lot of tangible goods. Someone who might be driving a late model car that doesn't have a high value, that tangible tax rate decrease doesn't impact them as much. It's still good, but taking the tax off of utility bills is, I think, one of the best things that we can do to help everyone in our city. So I really like the idea of that, and I think I like the idea of, if it's a possibility, or if we're going to go down that venue, I would advocate more for eliminating it completely rather than trying to wind it down. And this is what I'm thinking. There's a tremendous impact to the story that's told when we say we're a city that has eliminated a tax. Saying that we've, after these discussions, if we move forward with lowering our tax rates, that'll be the 9th consecutive year that we're doing that. That tells a big story as well. And I don't know that there's any other city in the entire United States that can brag the same. If we say on top of that we eliminated a tax, I think it'll begin to get attention, a lot more attention, because it's starting to add to the same story. And I think the impact that we could receive from that, and the businesses that would want to flood to Erlanger, they'll more than make up for that. And that's just a theory, but we're talking theory here, because that's the point, I think, Mayor, in that you're bringing these both up at the same time. I agree with Mrs. Reckers that it is two different topics, but the theory, you're talking about the theory of these tax rates, or the theory altogether. So that's my opinion, I should say, on the franchise fee. I think it'll have a lot bigger impact for the city to be able to say we eliminated a tax.
Ms. Reckers?
When you say draw attention to the city, it almost sounds like it's for political purposes, and I certainly hope that that's not the case. So the other tax rates are occupational, we've got insurance premium tax. Do we have any desire to lower any of those while we're here tonight, or just focusing on these two?
Sure, rock with it.
I was
What are
just
your
curious, I mean, because if we're talking about other revenue streams.
Yeah. We did insurance premium tax a really little bit in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with insurance premium tax is it's not predictable. So
we're reducing the most predictable tax that we have right now at $807,000 in revenue.
our most predictable?
One of our most predictable ones, right? Tangible, or excuse me, the franchise?
I mean, the auditable, I guess, is the more proper word I should have used. Insurance premium tax, we don't have a way to audit those numbers. And if you're actually receiving all of the insurance premiums, and that's across the entire state, there's just not a way to audit those numbers and know that you're receiving the actual amount that you are actually owed. Yeah. But, I mean, that's an option. I guess if there's not consensus, is there a different suggestion, recommendation? I guess I would want to hear from some of the other individuals that haven't spoken yet. on their opinions. It's kind of critical. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Skidmore, Ms. Skidmore.
I do agree that tackling the taxes is important for our community, and that is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay. Ms. Kyle?
Well, I mean, what if people wanted to change the recommended amount on the taxes, tweak that a bit, so that you could also attack the franchise tax? I mean, that's another option. I'm not saying that that's exactly what I would do, but I'm just saying, you know, we need to consider that too, if somebody felt like that would be the better option, that instead of like 0.270, just, you could still reduce taxes, but, you know what I'm saying? Keep it like at a different number. I don't know how you play with those numbers. I guess that's Kara's expertise, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you want to do that, or this year, go with the reduction in the property taxes, and then talk about the franchise tax later on. And I have one comment on the franchise tax, and I don't know if it's a popular thing to say or not, but it's the truth. I do remember when we started that franchise fee, and it was for our dispatch. Is that correct? Do you remember that, Kyle? And then when our dispatch went away, the franchise fee was still there, but we felt like we needed the money, so we kept it. So before that, I mean, we didn't have that franchise fee. So it's not all that ancient. But I mean, that's another option if you don't want to miss that 500 and something thousand. Yeah, but I thought she said if we lowered, if we lower, she's saying it's 800, but if we lowered the taxes and dropped the franchise, I thought you said we would be missing 500,000.
We'd be missing about 250. So the difference between the projected revenues that are in the budget, yeah, for this fiscal year. Yeah. So 804,000 is what we have in this year's budget for projected revenues for the franchise fee. And then if we subtract the increase in revenues for the recommended tax rate for the property and the tangible, that's $544,916, and the difference is $259,084.
From our
difference.
budget this year that we budgeted already for. Oh, okay,
Yes.
so it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
200 and, about 250.
259 reduction in
Okay.
revenues
Well,
overall.
that's not too bad.
Overall, yeah. Mr. Cahill?
Yeah, so yes, I was around for that franchise also, but I think also that you've seen that our services have grown, and that $200,000 is a pumper, a rescue truck. Yeah, right. So I just am concerned about the loss of that revenue. So if we're going to looking at this, I definitely would like to see some type of wind down. I get concerned when I see us reducing. I agree that we need to, but I think we need to be strategic about it, how we do that, so.
Okay, what other questions or recommendations or comments, concerns? Mr. Hermes?
If we, the $250,000 you're talking about with this current budget, that's anticipating that it would be effective when?
Well, that would be effective
Almost
immediately.
Yeah.
And that's not reality.
What if we just, could we pass that, if council decided that's the route they wanted to go, could we pass it to take effect like June of next year?
I think from what Jack said, it's kind of like, it could be part of the negotiations with Duke and Owen and, when the effective date would be.
I think if we push it out that far, then we're likely to be able to hit that date instead of, people trying to,
Yeah.
or Duke and Owen trying to make it actually happen.
Yeah.
Mr. Cagle?
I don't know what the time, I'll just be brutally honest. I've never gone back and negotiated down a franchise in a current 10-year agreement.
We're trying to do.
All the more reason
And
why this is
I'm
such
being
an
totally
awesome
transparent
idea.
with you all. I feel like I generally have an answer 98% of the time on this one. I'm phoning a friend. I'm like texting madly other attorneys here, seeing has anyone ever done this. I think that's reasonable that we could do that. Again, presuming that they're going to pass that on to the customers.
So I think that's the issue. Are they going to pass it along? And then that 250 is compounding because we're going to see that year after year, that loss. So.
I would just remind council, I think these are all great conversations, and I'm not trying to, but staff has some very practical problems right now with the calendar, and we're working through that. If we go anything beyond Comp Plus 4, we have to have a public hearing, and there has to be 2 weeks' notice in an actual newspaper, the Inquirer. And we're just going through the calendar as to when we would trigger that public hearing. You're snickering.
I'm just laughing that you said actual newspaper.
Well, because we don't believe that because about a month or two ago, the law changed for ordinances that we could do it on Link NKY, much easier process. Dealing with the Inquirer and putting something in an actual newspaper, which is what this statute requires, because they didn't modify this statute when they changed to Link NKY or digital sources. We have to now go back to an actual paper newspaper. There's some limitations as far as our notice to the newspaper and their publication of the notice. So we're working through that. We have to publish it 2 consecutive weeks, and then the issue becomes, do we have that public hearing before or after a first or second reading? And we've got to get 2 readings in, 2 weeks actual notice, and have the tax bills done basically in about 32 days. So we're just working through the logistics, and all I'm saying is I think we need a decision from council tonight on that issue, and then we're going to have to map out our public hearing, our first and second readings that might not follow our normal schedule. Not that that matters. I'm just saying logistically that's an issue we have.
Mr. Eckers?
I would support Comp Plus 4. So I think that would eliminate that issue.
I'm going to have to look at statute. I don't know if it's Comp Plus 4 or Comp Plus 3. I think it's Comp Plus 3. But still anything over Comp Plus 2 requires a public hearing. Yeah, so anything above 4 would allow a recall of 10% of the last voters from the presidential election, but anything above Comp Plus 2 still requires a public hearing, which is not an issue. We just need to schedule it, and then we need to understand council's comfort in a caucus setting tonight with moving forward and putting out in a newspaper a public hearing on the rate, right? And again, unfortunately, and this is a legislative issue, we get this data with a week. I mean, the timelines are just not helpful. They're just not, the state expects a lot of people to do a whole lot in a short period of time.
Yeah, I don't think we had the numbers until last week. Yeah, last week. So. Yeah. So So we definitely don't get helped with getting the data in a timely fashion. Miss Kyle.
I know, I feel like I'm dominating this thing. Well, okay, so if we lower the property taxes and we say, okay, let's table the franchise, we'll talk about it later, we're still going to be collecting more money than was budgeted because of the increase in the property values, is that right? Okay.
Not, I mean, not tremendously. Can we bring up?
That'd be based on,
Can we bring this up?
Because I know the property values just went up, they were soaring high, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, not like it should be our.
And they've said you could challenge it, but in my neighborhood, property values, they've been selling for that price, so I couldn't challenge it because it's right there, you know? And that's the pickle that a lot of people are in. The taxes are going to be outrageous. Too bad we can't control Kenton County taxes. I just want to make sure we have enough money to cover everything coming up in the budget with a little bit of leeway.
I really love that we are discussing how much the tax reduction is.
Yeah, no
That we're
matter
arguing
what.
about how much it is. This is making my night.
No matter what, it's a reduction. It's just how much of a reduction. So this is the document you all received in your, from Kara. All right. So you can see down here at the bottom are the fiscal year '24 budget, the real property versus the personal property. And then you can come up here, because we pay attention. We don't just look at the revenue numbers, we look at the discount numbers, because a lot of people pay prior to, the majority get the discount, so we take that off. So when we were anticipating these amounts, we're looking at this net revenue versus the actual revenue. So
And do we have the homestead thing calculated in sort of too?
that's part of the discounts.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an estimate because people apply all the time. So, this is the budgeted amount. And here are the amounts based on comp plus 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 11 was just to try and offset some of the potential reduction on the franchise fee or any other taxes that you all wanted to reduce. You got to pay attention to this. Tangible tax also. I'm going to excuse myself because there's a couple of other pieces of data that I want to show you all, and I have them on my computer.
So if we go over comp plus 4, I want to make sure I understand procedurally what could happen. So the public, anytime it's more than comp plus 4, can form a committee and do a petition, which is 10% of the amount of people that voted in the last general, which was approximately
No, last presidential.
So a little under 6,000 in Erlanger, so 600 signatures.
Yep.
And
They would have 45 days to present that to the
45
clerk.
days to force it down to 4,
To what?
to force the rate from 11 to 4, if we take comp plus 11.
No, it would revert back to compensating, I believe.
Ooh, when we would lose it all, guys.
My understanding, and Kara, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is we would have to operate as a city under compensating until after that recall vote. And the timing of the recall vote, so they have 45 days after we do a second reading. Theoretically, we would do a second reading, let's say around mid-September. So they would then have 45 days to give that to Gabe Summey's office, probably not making November's election. So probably that probably doesn't go until the primary election in May, realistically. I don't know how she would be able to print ballots out that quickly. That's, again, a Gabe Summey question.
But the reality is that committee will be formed, likely. So is it worth it to potentially lose any opportunity at plus 4 by shooting for plus 11?
No, the committee's 5. So the way the statute says is you have a committee of 5 that the clerk then certifies the committee, and then that committee can prepare a petition, get 10% of whatever the last election's signatures are, and if they get 10% of last general or last presidential election signatures, then the clerk has to put it on the ballot for the voters then to recall the increase. Yes. Anything, and I may have misstated, anything above compensating rate would require a public hearing. The recall is only for over 4. I misstated. It's anything over compensating. It requires a public hearing.
So I just
No,
wanna-
public hearing is anything above compensating rate. But that just, all that would require is, that's not a huge issue. We just have to logistically work through that tonight to get the 2 weeks' notice to the newspaper and then enough time to do a first and second reading, which we can do. It's just,
I just wanted to show you all. So the rate that was proposed would bring us back to the 2007, 2008 rate. Just think about that for a second. Still an enormous reduction in the tax rate. 29%, we've never done that before. Never been able to do this. This is huge. And then for tangible, the 0.213 actually brings us down to 1999 rate. A 61% decrease. So we have never had these types of conversations. Never. We have never had where comp plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 11, 12, 20 are still reductions. We've just never had this. It's unprecedented. We love that word, don't we? So that's why we're having unprecedented conversations. And if there's a voter recall on a reduction of 29%, I'm sorry?
That's comp plus 11.
But if there's a recall, which is very likely, that they could get those numbers, we drop from comp plus 11 and have to operate at comp, and it doesn't, does it go, at that point, Jack, does it go to comp plus 4? I mean, this is or does it go to comp?
I believe it would go to comp.
Yeah, which would be a reduction in income by how much?
Here's your net.
Yeah, 42 to,
So you wouldn't see a reduction.
we'd be in the red 300,000?
No. 300? No, not 300. If you're looking at
600.
4,345,000, 4,344,000, 4,308,000.
But we're talking about operating at comp.
That would be 4,271.
Which is in the red. That would be in the red, exactly. So is it worth it, is what I'm saying, when we know a committee is going to be formed?
I guess it just depends on if you want to reduce or remove another tax, and
Which we don't know if we can actually do, and it would actually impact the residents. That's why it's two different conversations.
Should we talk about some of the other options that you were bringing up, Mrs. Reckers? Because honestly, I do hear a lot about, I mean, people will complain about the insurance premium tax. I'll hear that several times a year from people. I don't hear people complain about the utility tax because either they don't pay attention or they don't know. But is there, I mean, I think it would be, we reduced that tax rate by 0.25% a few years back. Yeah. I mean, if we could make a substantial decrease in that rate as well, I think it would be helpful.
Ms. Nicely.
I just wanted to clarify something as well, too, and understand, maybe I'm totally off. If property evaluations have gone up, our taxes have gone up as far as, on our properties, I'm sorry, so your insurance, insuring your house would go up. So there would be a higher insurance surcharge we would be collecting, right? So we've not really mentioned that we'll be getting more money from our insurance premiums.
That's a good point.
On property. So I just wanted to clarify, we may not necessarily be missing as much coming in as we're thinking we are.
It almost always works out that way.
I mean, I was just thinking property value's gone up, it's going to cost more that you insure it, and higher insurance premiums, so we may not really be losing what we're thinking we're losing, even though you said we can't really figure exactly with the insurance premium surcharge, but unless I'm missing something, it seems like that surcharge is going to go up because our insurance premiums are going up because our property's worth more value, right?
I did just get my bill, and it is higher. I didn't think about that. Ms. Kyle?
Okay, I got my insurance bill too, and it was astronomical. But anyway, I also think that with the, giving the businesses a break on the tangible taxes, that's phenomenal, because in the last, I don't know what, 8 years, 10 years, businesses have really increased in Erlanger. Look at what we've got going now that we didn't have a while back. That's where a lot of our money's coming from. You know, they are the force behind the city. They keep the city going, more than the property taxes. So business is a real important thing to look at. And then, too, payroll taxes, that's going to come in. But you're right, that insurance tax, that's another one that's going to go up with the property values. So, but I really think, you know, giving the taxpayers a break and the businesses a break is going to show profits, because more people are willing to come to Erlanger now than they used to.
Yeah, several years ago when I was looking at the insurance premium tax, there's many different sources, and unfortunately, so they do break it down into a spread, the life insurance and homeowners and what are the others? There was medical insurance. There's like 6 or 7 different insurances that we have the insurance premium tax that gets applied to. And I thought, how cool would it be to try and eliminate it from one of those? And you can't do it. It's just not. It's not a thing that we can do, because like life insurance, we shouldn't be paying taxes on that. And if you break it down into bite-sized pieces, you can eliminate something very easily, or easier than a whole thing. Mr. Hermes?
I hate putting Mrs. Kramer on the spot, but do you happen to know about how much we bring in from the insurance premium tax?
Not without our computer.
Okay.
Sorry, I look at numbers all day long.
Yeah. I'd be curious, what 1%, if we reduce that by 1%, what that would equate to. It is. It's a huge chunk. I realize. It's not as much, I wouldn't expect it would be as much as eliminating the utility tax. You think it'd be more?
Well, I don't know, more, not necessarily the wrong thing.
I don't even know what this means. Yeah. Read that and you tell me what you think that means.
This D.
Yeah.
So a lot of discussion, but back to the real property, the safest way to do this is the Comp Plus 4, which doesn't allow the committee to be formed, doesn't have the recall potential, correct?
I mean,
Still gotta
there would
have-
be no recall potential with a Comp Plus 4.
Right, correct. But we will have to have public notice, which you guys need to know about.
We'd have to have public hearing, which again, and I don't want to overcomplicate that. I mean, we can do a public
is
hearing
fine,
the
yeah.
same night we have a first reading,
Right.
right? I mean, that's just
Right.
putting something in the newspaper. That's not a big deal.
Well, I know you guys are you said there's a time issue now with the
Well,
change in the statute.
Sherry's working on the schedule right now as we're talking to fit it in.
Okay.
I just need to know.
And I've read the section about what happens if the recall doesn't pass. Sherry's read it. I'm not really sure what it says. I'll read it to you all, and you all can make your own determination. I think logic would say it goes back to compensating rate. That would, to me, be logical, but I'm going to actually read you what it says. If the ordinance, order, resolution, or motion fails to pass pursuant to an election held pursuant under paragraph A or B of the subsection, the property tax, which will produce 4% more revenues from real property exclusive of revenue from new property, blah, 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 then the amount as defined in KRS 132.010, then the amount of revenue produced by the compensating tax rate defined in KRS 132.01 shall be levied without further approval by the local government. So I think that's saying it goes back to compensating rate. It's just, they could use a few less words. But I think that's what that's saying, which again is logical, right? If the voters basically are rejecting comp plus whatever, it would go back to what the state said we should charge, which is in their mind what compensating rate is, right? It's the amount of revenue, which is the same amount of revenue to carry forward what you had last year. Now, what is also a little unclear is whether you can collect the full amount. I don't think we'd want to do that. I mean, my advice, and I would think that Kara's advice would be is if we went forward with that, I wouldn't want to collect the additional revenue and then refund it back to people. I think it would be better not to collect it. I wouldn't want to collect comp plus 11 and then have a recall notice and then have to refund people. You know what I'm saying? I think that would be a pain. Yeah, I think if there was a recall vote, I think we would realistically want to charge compensating rate until the election came back, one way or the other. Yeah, and the statute actually says if there's a second billing, it's on the city, but I don't know what that billing cost is. So here's two possible schedules on a public hearing. We can advertise for the public hearing on 8/22, on 8/29, have the public hearing on 9/5, do the first reading on 9/5, and come back with a second reading on 9/12. And that would meet all of our requirements to get to the bills on time.
He says,
I'd prefer to have the public hearing the night of the first reading. I think we could do a public hearing after a first reading, but I think that kind of goes against the concept of the public hearing. Like, I would hate to be between a first and second reading, because then if the public hearing swayed people, we would have to have a new first reading anyway. So I think it's just cleaner and neater to do the first reading the same night as the public hearing.
Ms. Kyle?
So let's just go with comp 4, and then we don't have all these problems.
All right.
Well, we have the public hearing, but there's no opportunity for a recall.
Yeah, as long as we let the franchise thing go until later on, when we figure out something with that. But yeah, I would go with the comp 4, and that would avoid a lot of problems. And you're still coming out with more revenues than what you budgeted, so.
And you're significantly reducing the tax rate still. Yeah. I mean, like crazy reduction of the tax rate.
Yes, sir.
I hate to be this guy, but could we take like a brief recess or something? And Kara, can you get the insurance premium? Because I mean, I think if we're going to talk about it, I know it's, again, it's two different topics, but if we can couple this.
We've historically done it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be, if we could talk about a slight reduction in.
What do you want her to calculate?
How much do we bring in from the 8.75% insurance premium tax that we collect?
Just how much we're currently bringing in?
Yeah.
I can run and get those numbers, but I wouldn't be able to do a reduction right now. Is that what you're asking for, a reduction?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the number. How much do we collect from that rate? And we can figure out I can figure out the reduction rates from there.
Okay, we're going to have a brief recess. right, y'all. We need to kind of reconvene. That's all right.
Cranky.
Need to bang the gavel for this?
All right, well, we're missing one now. We're missing someone. All right.
Okay, so Mrs. Kramer said that the amount that's brought in with our rate of 9.75, or 9.75, insurance premium tax rate is about $4 million a year.
Correct. Approximately 4
So
million.
each percentage is about 410,000. Yeah.
Well, so if we want to, that's super, super rough, okay?
Yeah,
Remember
okay.
that these are
So it's all
super
this
rough
is.
estimates. So if we want to go off of when we started discussing the 2020 reduction of the insurance premium tax, we were using 2018 numbers because we were going off of actuals. So the 0.25% was approximately $70,000 reduction in our revenues. But again, that was based on 2018 numbers, so.
Yeah, we figured it was going to be, if it was 0.25%, it would be about a $100,000 reduction.
Yeah.
So I think what Mrs. Reckers and I were talking about is if we coupled the Comp Plus 4 with a 0.25%, it might be taking too much of a chunk all at once. Maybe we don't do the insurance premium tax reduction, but I think a lot of people would notice that and would appreciate that.
Are you talking about for fiscal year '25 or in fiscal year '24?
That's a great point, because it wouldn't, we would basically be voting now to take action, and Sherry can correct me on this, but I think we'd be taking action in February or March of next year to be able to put the proper notices into the insurance company's hands.
That is correct.
It really
based on
wouldn't take effect until next year, but that's the way we always have to do this. Otherwise, we'll never be able to reduce an insurance premium tax.
Yeah, because we just passed the budget for fiscal year '24, so.
So for right now, all we're really talking about is Comp Plus 4.
All right, so Comp Plus 4.
I think a straw poll would say we're all in
Yep, let's do a straw poll, and Ms. Hoffman, if you can do roll. That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Hermes?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Cahill? Ms. Skidmore? Ms. Kyle?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Nicely?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Reckers?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Skidmore?
All right, so let's go ahead and calendar this all now. The calendar that I discussed, I know Ms. Hoffman has it. If you want to go ahead and tell us the calendar.
So we would advertise we have to advertise twice for the public hearing. So the first advertisement would be August 22nd. The second advertisement would be August 29th. We would have the public hearing on September 5th at 6:45. Have the first reading on September 5th at 7 o'clock, and then have the second reading on September 12th.
So does that alter us having a special meeting next week? Mr. Glenn, Mayor?
The only item we were going to have other than this on the agenda for next week would be the Resilient Fund first reading. So if that could be tabled to the September 5th meeting. Yeah. Give me 5. That's not going to alleviate the need for an August 22nd meeting because we're going to need to take a reading on the wage scale. Otherwise, that's going to kick all the wage scale second readings to October.
Hold on here. Why? Why couldn't it be, and I don't care, but I mean, why couldn't we do the first reading? I mean, we have a meeting on the 5th, we're doing the first reading, we're coming back, special meeting on the 12th. Why couldn't we do the second reading of wage scale on the 12th of September? It would only kick it back a week. I mean, I don't care, we can have a meeting for that, I'm just saying.
If we could do it on that special meeting. It just costs us a week. Yep, that'll be fine.
I mean,
It is not that I want a meeting on the 22nd. It's not my intention to have meetings every week, believe me. But yeah, that'll work. We can't advertise for the HR position until we get that second reading done. So it puts us to no sooner than the 12th of September. But that's the way, I mean, we're talking a week, that's fine.
All right.
so just to be clear, is there consensus from council to not have a meeting on August 22nd? All right.
Okay. Okay, next item on the agenda, amended sidewalk agreement. Director Kevin Quinn.
Okay, I'll speak real quick on this. So we talked already. I'm just going to step in. Okay, so Public Works has been working on this for the last month, and we still haven't got a hard number back from the state, so we're not ready to discuss it. We're going to push that to the whatever caucus meeting date we're going to have in September.
Sweet. All right, number 3, Resilience Fund. Ms. Reckers.
Thank you. So we took the notes that I had drafted and we had reviewed as a governing body during the last caucus meeting, and Ms. Kramer added additional policy around the Resilience Fund. So then Mr. Gatlin turned it into legislation. So you've all been provided a copy of that. And it's just the one blurb that would be the Resilience Fund, but the whole policy is part of the legislation. So we're happy to look at any revisions that would need to be made. If not, we would be looking at a first reading at the next, I don't know, when, 9/5? 9/5-ish? Sure, that would be the first reading.
No discussion?
No discussion, y'all?
Brilliance. Let's move on. All right. Next on the agenda. My agenda just disappeared. Okay. 3140 Dixie Highway, foreclosure. Mr. Gatlin.
Yeah, so it's been a while since we've had one of these in front of council. So a while back, we established a protocol that at any time there are code enforcement liens or taxes that exceed $3,000 on any one property, we would have internal discussions, and we were having quarterly meetings now internally on all of these matters, that we would bring, they would then internally decide whether it made sense for us to move forward with foreclosure. So we had that meeting, we've made the decision internally that it makes sense to move forward with foreclosure, and now we just need to have council's blessing of it. 3140 Dixie Highway is the old Colonial Cottage building, and they have extensive liens on the property. We have done extensive remediation to the property. Our costs well exceed $3,000. We have given them every opportunity in the world to clean things up, to make matters right, and we've kind of just been stonewalled. Is that fair? So I think the next step needs to be for us to initiate foreclosure, not that we actually think we're going to end up foreclosing on 3140 Dixie Highway, but I think we need to get their attention. They need to demolish it. They need to clean that mess up. They need to make it safer. And it is our opinion that foreclosure at least will push that and get, like I said, get their attention a little bit. By way of background, and we're getting this through PDS, the business that was going to locate there is running into some issues potentially with curb cuts with the state. We don't know if it's going to locate there or not, but the property owner still is responsible in our mind for making sure that there's not a burnt down building that's now going on, what, 2 years, year and a half, 2 years? So does anyone have any questions about that? Everybody's comfortable with moving forward with foreclosure on that property? Again, with the mindset that we're really not going to end up at the courthouse steps with that commercial property, but it's going to, again, get their attention. All right, then we'll go ahead and move forward with that. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Glenn, amended wage scale.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Again, we're here talking about amended wage scale. So everybody got the memo that was prepared by Kara in their council packets. First, I'd like to talk about the Economic Development Director, Assistant City Administrator position. What we're wanting to do is change the pay band on that from pay band D to pay band C, which would put that position in alignment with the Director of Public Works and the Director of the Finance Department. So I think that that Director of Economic Development would kind of fit well within that pay band and provide the city the means to secure the type of individual that we're looking at to fill that position. So with that, I want to talk about the Human Resource Director position that I came before council several months ago. It was the intent of staff to change that position from administrator level to a director. It was a director level position maybe years ago, and then it was brought to administrator level position, and then we, with council's approval, changed it back to a director level. So that's kind of proved to be difficult. We have completed rounds of interviews with candidates, and I think one thing was kind of apparent to us is the difficulties finding somebody that could operate at a director level vision and capabilities and still possess the capabilities to do the day-to-day grind of the administrative side of things. Also, the pay ended up being an issue as well. So it kind of caused a couple difficulties, which we came up with more than a good solution. So whereas we wanted that director level responsibilities in the HR department, what we're proposing and what we brought before the interview committee was changing Kara's position, changing the finance department to include the HR department as well. So Kara's position would be the director of the finance/HR department. So with doing that, and of course, everybody knows Kara and knows that she has the capabilities of operating at a director level position, and that would be great to also have her working in the HR realm. But with that, that's extra responsibilities, and that's going to be impossible for her to take on without her putting down some responsibilities as well. So what we want to do is structure her department, which would be finance and HR, to where the accountant position that is currently underneath her would also change to assistant finance HR director, so assistant position, taking on a lot of the responsibility that Kara currently does in the finance department, also managing a lot of the things in the HR side of things as well. So that position would morph with a lot more responsibility in both departments. And then taking the HR director level position that's currently vacant and taking it back to administrator, like a yo-yo, and I apologize for that, but taking that back to administrator level position that then would be under the assistant finance director / HR. So really just taking the position, we're not adding a position or wanting to add a position, we're just wanting to restructure it and restructure CARE's department to accommodate all these changes. So with that, on the memo that she prepared, bear with me. So her pay band would just simply be, would require a job description change, so in a title change. So Kara's position will go from Director of Finance to Director of Finance / HR. The Assistant Director of Finance / HR would be a new title, so the accountant would go to that. And what we're asking for is a change in the pay band, which is currently in, that's in pay band G, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So currently, the accountant pay band is in I, and we would be taking that to G, which would be in alignment also with the assistant city clerk. So you would have the assistant city clerk and the assistant finance director HR also in the same pay band. So that kind of makes sense in our world. And then we would be taking the director of the human resource, which is in pay band E, and then reducing that back to pay band H. So that would drop down several pay bands into the H. So, where we took it from administrator up one pay band to F, now we're taking it down several to H to accommodate this new structure in the finance world. And then also what we're proposing is we omitted in the wage scale that we put before you a couple months ago, there was 2 positions that were just simply not included. They've always been included. They're not new positions, but they were omitted from the last pay band, which was the police social service coordinator and a paramedic. So we've found those omissions and added that back in. I know that's a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes, Diana.
So just for the record, though, we're not asking for any more money. It's just that salary is being divvied up 3 ways, basically, correct?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so all these changes will not require any budget amendment. We're operating within the approved budget. All right, great, thank you, appreciate it.
All right, that concludes our meeting. Do I entertain a motion that we adjourn? Ms. Kyle, Ms. Reckers, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Have a good evening.